According to this outdated survey, it looks like the average person in the US spends about $20 per week on eating out for lunch. What if I told you there's a cheaper option for lunch? And no, I'm not talking about packing PB&Js. I'm talking about making chili. Hey guys, I'm Mike, and today we're cooking on a budget, baby. I'm gonna show you guys how to make a week's worth of food, all for under $20. But first, if you're new here, I just want to welcome you to the channel. I post new videos every Wednesday talking about a variety of topics that all have to do with saving money. Speaking of saving money, we're going to be making one of my favorite lunches today, which is a big bowl of chili.
Yummy.
And what makes this chili unique is I like to sprinkle in, a little bit of financial knowledge while I cook. I think it gives it a little bit of extra flavor. And so let's get started with the cooking, and then later we can talk about what to do with all the extra money that you're saving, since you're no longer ordering takeout for lunch anymore. Alright, so the first thing you're going to need is this handy dandy scorecard that I created. And we're going to use this to judge how the chili actually turned out later towards the end of the video. And we can see here that the criteria that I'm using to judge the chili is based off a few different factors, which range from cost of ingredients to other categories like nutrient level and overall shelf life for this meal. And so for now, just keep this in the back of your mind and we can revisit this scorecard once the chili is ready. Alright, to start off, you're gonna need 3 pans. The first pan is gonna be used to cook your meat. The second pan we'll use to saute all the vegetables. And then the final pan is not a pan at all. It's actually a crock pot. Think of this as the mothership that's going to marinate all the ingredients together. And don't worry if you don't have a crock pot. You can improvise with a wok or another large pot if you have one. Alright, now that we have all the vessels to cook this chili in, we're going to need to go to the store to purchase the raw ingredients. Lucky for you, I've already done this. And so let's introduce the produce first. You're going to need 1 onion, 2 jalapenos, 1 piece of garlic, 1 red pepper, and 1 green pepper. And for the canned food, you're going to want to grab 1 can of the following. We need crushed tomatoes, diced tomatoes, tomato paste, black beans, kidney beans, and finally, bone broth. And all these cans should be the same size, with the exception of tomato paste. You're going to want to grab the smaller can for that one. And so the only thing we're missing now is the ground turkey and the seasoning. So usually ground beef is used in chili recipes, but since I'm trying to eat somewhat healthy, I'm gonna go with the less fattier type of meat, which is ground turkey. And finally, we can't forget about the seasoning. I buy the pre-packaged chili seasoning, which costs about $1.09. And you could always do it the old school way, where you buy the individual spices and then use teaspoons to measure everything out. But let's be honest, ain't nobody got time for that. So we're just gonna stick with the prepackaged seasoning instead. And next, we're gonna grab the produce and dice it up into small pieces so it looks just like this. And then we're gonna take those pieces along with some butter and cook them on a low setting in one of the pans that we're using. And I like to throw in some bone broth just to give the veggies a little extra flavor. And once the onions and bell peppers start to change color and take on sort of like a floppy-like texture, then you know they're almost done and you can start to get the meat ready. And to brown the meat, you're going to want to put butter in the pan and cook the meat on a medium-low setting until it's cooked all the way through. And as a reference, I feel like everyone's eaten tacos before. So once the meat you're cooking looks like taco meat, and you no longer see any pink left, then you know the meat is cooked all the way through. And so at this point, you have your cooked meat and your veggies ready, and now you're going to transfer everything over to the mothership, aka the crock pot. And so once you have all your meat and vegetables inside the crock pot, that's when you can start to open up all your canned food and begin to pour everything into the crock pot. Be sure to drain the liquid from the canned beans, as we do not want to include that in our chili. And that brings us to our last step, which is to pour the seasoning packet into the crock pot and then mix all the ingredients together. And one tip I have for you is for adjusting the thickness of the chili. While stirring your chili, if it feels like it's way too thick, you can always add bone broth to it until it gets to the right thickness. And that's pretty much it. The last step is to cook low and slow, baby. I would try to let your chili cook on the lowest setting for about 3 hours. Usually the longer you let it marinate, the better the chili will turn out. And so while we let that cook, let's revisit our scorecard and see if there's anything we can fill out while we wait for our chili to cook. Alright, so it looks like this top category is for how expensive this meal is to make. On a scale of 1 to 10, we'll have 10 be affordable and then 1 be expensive. I'm going to give the chili a score of 9, and here's why. Remember in the intro of this video when I showed you guys that statistic that mentioned how the average American spends about $20 per week on eating out at lunch? Well, if we take that number and convert it into Chipotle burritos, that means you're eating about 2 Chipotle burritos a week. Meanwhile, if we add up our grocery bill for the chili that we made today, it looks like the total cost for this meal is about $18.10. Now, I don't know how many meals this chili is going to last us, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that it's probably going to last more than 2 meals. Meaning that we got more food for less money just by making this chili. Moving on to the next category of the scorecard, we can rate the nutrition level of our chili. So using the same scale, we'll have 10 be the healthy side and 1 be the unhealthy side. I'm going to give this a rating of 6.5. And here's why. When analyzing the nutrients for this meal, I use an app on my phone called MyFitnessPal, where you can just scan the barcode for each ingredient and it automatically tells you what the overall nutrients are for that meal. So looking at my screen recording here, it looks like this chili has lots of protein. It's low in fat, but the biggest downfall is it has a bunch of sodium. Wow, it looks like this has 9,000 milligrams of overall sodium, which is way too high. I think an alternative would be to actually make the beans yourself, as opposed to buying them in the can. But anyways, the high sodium in this meal is the reason I'm going to give it a score of 6.5.
Alright, before we get to taste test our chili,
there's still 2 more categories that I want to go over quickly. And the first is shelf life. So on a score of 1 to 10, I think chili is going to get a score of 10 for shelf life. Chili is great to store in the freezer and it reheats very well. So you could definitely make this meal in bulk and then store your leftovers in the freezer. And that brings us to the mobility category. Unlike a sandwich where you can pretty much eat anywhere without utensils, chili is a little bit different. You need to store it in a container, you need a spoon to eat it with, and hopefully you have a microwave nearby so you can reheat it. So chili is definitely not as mobile as a sandwich. And for that reason, I'm going to give it a score of 4 out of 10. And so I think it's been 3 hours now, so let's go see how the chili turned out. Alright, so here's our final product. I'm about to taste test this and then give it a score of 1 through 10. 1 will be cottage cheese. I hate cottage cheese. And then 10 will be pizza, which is my favorite food. Yay! Alright, so here we go. So based on the cottage cheese pizza scale, I would give this a solid 7. I think it probably could have been a little bit spicier. So maybe next time I'll use habaneros instead of jalapenos. But overall, solid 7 on the taste test. And if we revisit our scorecard, it looks like in total, our chili received a score of 7.3 out of 10. And I don't really know what that means because I have nothing to compare that score to. So maybe I'll have to make another video similar to this one so we can get a good comparison between 2 inexpensive lunches. And as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I told you guys I'd be sprinkling in some financial knowledge in this chili recipe. So listen up. Alright, so all the ingredients for the chili that I just made cost $18.10. And if we really want to make this meal last the whole week, then we can eat the chili with brown rice, which will cost us an extra couple bucks. And so let's assume that all the ingredients for chili and a bag of brown rice comes out to be about $22. And if I use my psychic powers, it looks like this recipe is going to give us 6 days worth of lunches. And that means that one bowl of Chilean rice is going to cost us about $3.67 to make. And if we compare that to the outdated survey that I showed you guys in the beginning of this video, it looks like the average cost of lunch in the US is $11.14, which means that you're paying about $7.50 more for eating out. And the point I'm trying to make here is instead of spending that extra $7.50 per meal, you could be investing that amount instead. Let me walk you through an example. But first, this is a question for you guys watching at home right now. How many of you have $1,000 in your bank account right now? I'm talking if an emergency happened today, then you would have no problem withdrawing $1,000 to cover an unexpected expense. Well, if you don't have a $1,000 emergency fund, then don't worry because Frugal Fam is here to help. Alright, so here's the scenario. You have $0 in savings right now, and your goal is to eventually save up $1,000 for an emergency fund. And so we want to figure out how long it's going to take to save up to reach our $1,000 goal. And now that we know my secret chili recipe, we can completely stop eating out for lunch. And so by not eating out twice a week for lunch, you save about $14.95 per week. And instead of putting that money into our bank account, which earns next to nothing on interest, we're going to invest that money into an index fund, such as the S&P 500, which has a 10-year average return rate of about 10%. And so that means every week, instead of buying our Chipotle burritos for lunch, we're going to take that $14.95 and invest it into our S&P 500 index fund. Meaning that every week, that $14.95 is going to grow, which leads to the question...
How many weeks is it going to take to get that $14.95 to grow into $1,000?
Well, according to our fancy Excel formula, the answer is 63 weeks or 14 and a half months. There you go. Invest $14.95 every week for 1 year and 2.5 months, and then you'll have your own $1,000 emergency fund. And as always, stay frugal, fam. Hey guys, I just wanted to thank you for watching this video. Be sure to hit the subscribe button right above me, and then check out my other videos, which I'll have listed on this side of your screen. We'll see you next time, Frugal Fam.